this is Jay Horowitz with another edition of Amazing Mets on my podcast. The gentleman to my left all caught some of the great pitchers in Mets history. You know, Duffy Dyer, Mackey Sasser, Barry Lyons. Duffy caught Tom Seaver, Jerry Koosman, Nolan Ryan, John Matlock. Mackey and Barry caught, Doc Gooden, Frank Viola, and David Cone. Duffy, let me start with you. When you caught Tom Seaver in the beginning, did you think he would end up the Hall of Famer, 3 Cy Youngs?
Yes, I did. I think everybody knew he had great stuff, but the thing that made him so great was his knowledge of pitching. I've never caught a pitcher that was as smart as he was about pitching and how he knew himself, when he had his good stuff, when he didn't. And another great thing about him is he could adjust during the game. If he didn't have a breaking ball early, he'd go more fastballs and then slowly get his breaking balls, and he could change during the game. It was amazing, and he knew his own body, what he was capable of and what he wasn't during each game. And he was a great worker, hard worker. He knew himself, and of course, he was one of the greatest competitors I've ever seen.
You caught Nolan in the beginning when he was a Met. I mean, was wild in the beginning, the story goes.
Yes, yes, he was.
And 7 no-hitters later, he turned out.
It was unbelievable. We all knew what kind of stuff he had, but I caught him a little bit in the minor leagues also, and he was born with obviously a great arm, and he was very, very strong in the legs. That's what made him so powerful. But he always had a great curveball. Nobody taught that to him either, and most people don't realize what a great curveball he had, but he threw well over 100 miles an hour, had the great curveball, but he usually threw it about 55 feet. And if you got down on a fairly low crouch and he threw the ball up shoulder high, you couldn't get up there to catch it. I mean, it was by you and to the screen. So he was very hard, very difficult to catch when he was younger. But I think the thing that made him a great pitcher was after he got traded, he got a chance to pitch every 5th day,
right,
which he didn't do with us because we had such a great starting staff that he was just a little too inconsistent at that time.
Barry, why don't you and Mackey talk about Dwight, how it was to catch him?
I had the honor of my first major league start of catching Dwight in 1986, and so he had just come off the 85 season where he just dominated baseball, in such a way that it's rarely been done. But it was a great experience for me catching Doc. We were together in Instructional League one year and briefly together in Lynchburg in 83. But he was a very special pitcher, obviously, and his fastball was electric, and his curveball, a lot of people call the curveball Uncle Charlie. We call Doc's Lord Charles. But a special athlete, a special player, and one of the kindest, best guys you'll ever meet. But he was fun to catch, and certainly had a great career.
Mackey, how about you, Mackey?
Well, I caught him in '88 for the first time, and I thought he was one of the best pitchers I ever caught. The thing about him, he's such a great athlete. He can make adjustments and do the things he needed to do. But, in my mind, he could drop a curveball on you any time, in any count, whenever he wanted to. He didn't worry about base runners. He was there to do his thing and do it well. I can tell you a time when I walked out and talked to him, I said, if you just give me a little time, I can throw this guy out. And he said, I ain't worried about it. Go and strike this one out. So that's the kind of guy and mindset he had. And he was not also just one of the greatest pitchers, but he was a great hitter. He won plenty of ball games with his bat, just like he did pitching. But he was a dominant pitcher. He was downhill. The fastball he could keep up, but he could throw that curveball anytime he really needed to.
Do you think there's any thread between all the guys we just talked about? I mean, any one, thread that ties?
I think it's their legs. I mean, good pitchers like that really use the bottom half of their body, and Doc did it really well. I think you could say the same thing. I mean, it was just they dominate with the bottom half, and everything else worked for
You
them.
agree, Duffy?
Oh, yes, definitely. Tom, in fact, went clear down on his right knee on his follow-through, and not many pitchers did that. But any great pitcher definitely uses the bottom half of their body, and that's where most of them get their strength from.
You agree, Barry?
Arm speed.
And they've got their strength differently from where they do today, and I think that's where you have a lot of problem. Those guys used to run and run and run and run, and I don't know that they do that anymore. But obviously, as Mackey and Duffy both said, their legs was what set them apart. They had great arms, obviously knew how to pitch, and all the other qualities that great pitchers have, but their strength and their legs is what really set them apart.
I know if you guys know that Barry actually ended Seaver's career.
That's right.
He-
I was there.
He came back. He was rehabbing in Norfolk. Was the game at Norfolk or
No,
Shea
at Shea.
Stadium?
He did. He pitched an exhibition game in Norfolk,
Right.
and then we had a simulated game in Montreal.
He was 6 for 6, right?
And then we came back to
And
New
he
York.
said, Tom
and-
said, that's it for me. I'm done.
Yeah, that was it. I know he wasn't, quote unquote, the Tom Seaver, obviously, at that point in time. But for him to say, albeit tongue in cheek, when asked at his retirement press conference who the toughest hitter he ever faced, to have my name come out of his mouth is, as I said, tongue in cheek, but it's certainly an honor, and what an amazing pitcher.
Duffy, do you think Koosman gets overlooked with all this stuff? I mean, with Seaver. I mean, I remember in '69, and he after we lost the first game of the World Series, he won the second game, and he won the Klitschy game. Does a guy like that in history get overlooked?
I'm glad you asked that because I've always felt that Koo is one of the most underrated pitchers in the game of baseball. He was much better than most people realize. He had a great, very long career, and most people don't realize how good he was. Most of the people in New York might realize it, but even after he left New York, he had a very long career in Minnesota, and he was a much better pitcher than most people realize.
Was he the enforcer? I think Sabota told me a story that one time when Hands hit AG, and in the next at bat that Koosman broke Santos' elbow or something like that.
Right. He was not afraid to pitch inside, and he would always defend our hitters. I mean, if somebody got drilled on our team, you could always count on him getting even.
Yeah.
You know?
Mackey Barry overlooked it later on. We talk about Dwight and Darling, but a guy like Sid Fernandez sometimes gets lost in the shuffle too, doesn't he? I mean,
Yes.
with his stuff. I mean,
He had good stuff. I mean, he was that guy that was kind of in the middle of all those guys. Him and Ojeda were. But Sid, every time I caught Sid a lot because it was more of a give the defense a rest and put the other guys in because he threw fly balls all the time. He came from a different angle. He pushed the ball so it always rose. And they'd foul it off, pop it up, and do the things. But he was a great pitcher because he was another guy. You could throw a curveball and he'd throw it for a ball, and you double it up, it was guaranteed a strike.
Yeah.
And so he was a really good pitcher. It was just a different look, and he made him really well.
Sid trusted Mel Stottlemyre, and Mel gets overlooked probably. He had a great career as a pitcher and a pitching coach, and he gets more notoriety for the time he was with the Yankees, I believe. But he was the glue that really held that pitching staff that we had, which was the best in baseball by far. And Sid Fernandez was just one of the five, but he was special as well. As Mackey said, Mel really helped him in his naivety, if you will. He didn't know what, he trusted us to call the pitch, and he would. And as Mackey said, Mel taught us as catchers that you give him, if he throws a bad curveball, he says, go right back to it. And like Mackey just said, he would make it just a perfect pitch. But that was a lot of times called the curveball that was seldom swung at because the high fastball, it came out of the same window. And he had such spin on it. I'd like to see his spin rate, the way they measure things.
That's right.
Now, his curveball spin rate was off the charts.
What do you guys think about the clock next year for the pitchers? You yay opponent or for it, against it?
I was never for a clock in baseball, but being a partner and being involved in AA baseball in my hometown in Biloxi, I've had a chance to see the clock utilized for the last couple of years. And I've been sold on it a little bit. I don't know how they're going to implement it and then call infractions right off the bat. Minor League Baseball gave a whole full season and then the first month of last year before they started actually cracking down on it. they measured it, and they did studies and tests and kept charts and kept the numbers. But I'm not against it, but I think it needs to probably be more time, and then to start with for the first year, I think they need to bring it in slowly, not go with it right off the bat.
What do you guys think, Duffy?
Well, I'm personally right now I'm against it because I never thought there should be a clock in baseball. But I'm anxious to see how it works. But right now I'm against it. Although I do not like it when hitters step out and adjust their gloves all the time and make the pitcher wait. But I also don't like it when pitchers take too much time and fiddle around on the mound all the time. But right now, I'm against it. I just, but I am willing to take a look and watch it and see if it does improve. So I'm waiting to see it.
Hey, Barry and Mackey, how many guys did you catch Coney a lot? I mean,
Yes.
Yes, I did as well.
Did any of you were you any catching the famous game in Atlanta? I forget who caught when he forgot to
Mackey.
cover.
I was catching.
Yeah.
And he forgot to cover for. He was arguing with the
cover.
umpire.
He was arguing with the umpire, and they were just walking in. I mean,
Charlie
it was
Williams.
2 runs, and you couldn't get his attention. He was so wound up. He was so into that call, and so it was done. You know how Coney was.
Yeah.
I mean, he was locked in on getting that call, and they just walked through. You could holler all day long.
And we
then-
lost the game by a run or something.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
But once he figured it out, he was disappointed. I mean, you could see he dropped his head. But
You know what? I
he was
remember
in that
he's-
moment.
He stood by his locker after the game and never ran for anything.
That's-
Duffy. Next year is the 50th anniversary of the '73 team. Probably one of it's a great season. A little disappointed how the year ended. Tell me about the controversy. I spoke to somebody. Not one controversy, not the right word. We're ahead 3-2. I guess the consensus is the clubhouse was to let George Stone pitch the 6th game, right, and to rest Tom. Instead, we went with Tom on short rest, and we lost like 3-1 or 4-1, something like that. And unfortunately, we lost Game 7.
Right. I feel that most of the players thought we should go with George because he had an outstanding year. But I think Tom wanted to pitch that game, so I'm not positive. But if Tom went in and said, "I'd like to pitch this
Yeah.
game," I'm sure he's going to pitch that game. So, it was a tough decision, but. More controversial was the call of Willie Mays at home plate, but that's
I mean, that was
that's
when,
old
when he
news.
was down on the ground. When he was down on the ground.
yeah.
But refresh me.
We all thought, it was a close play at home plate, and we obviously thought he was safe, and Willie argued and thought he was safe, and we lost that argument, but that was a big turning point in that game.
What's one game you guys remember? Is there one game you caught? It doesn't have to be the guys we talked. Is there any other pitcher or one game that you remembered?
I personally, I remember, I think it was in August. It was near my birthday. That's why I remember it. We were starting to get, or at least we were starting to talk about catching the Cubs. And I believe it was near my birthday, and I believe we were 8.5 games still behind the Cubs with about 6 weeks to go. We were in Ford Field in Pittsburgh, and we had a doubleheader. And I caught Don Cardwell, and we won that game 1-0, and Cardi drove in the only run of the game.
Yeah, the other game was 1-0 too, right?
And the other game, Koosman threw, and we won 1-0, and Koosman drove in the only run of the game.
It's great.
Yeah. That's the one I remember personally catching with the Mets.
How about you guys?
I think it was Dave Cone pitching. He pitched a lot of games where he struck out. He had a lot of strikeouts at the beginning of his career. I mean, he was more wanting to strike out everybody instead of pitching.
Mac, did he throw 150 pitches in one game?
Yes. I mean, he would throw pitch after pitch after pitch, and his goal was to strike everybody out, which that's how he pitched. And he struck a lot of guys out. Later in his career, he learned how to pitch and finally throw another hitter. But it was a game he was pitching, and it was in St. Louis. I'll never forget it. And he was pitching, and it was like in the 9th inning, the bottom of the 9th, and he had got done. He'd done a great job. He brought John Franco in. Well, John Franco come in to pitch, and he was doing his thing with the little screwballs and all the stuff he threw. and I'll never miss. I still think about this game. You know, he threw a ball in the dirt. It rolled right to the top edge of the St. Louis dugout, and they tied it up. And I went over to told Franco. I said, "I'm sorry, man. I didn't try to do it or anything." He said, "Don't ever let it happen again."
Really?
Those are his exact words to me. So I've always remembered that. He don't realize what he did to me about blocking balls.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but things like that happen. But probably Dave Combs had some of the best games I ever caught.
Yeah. How about you, Barry?
Well, as I said earlier, we had the best staff in all of baseball, from the starting five and the two closers, and there's so many great memories. But mine also is with David in New York against the Phillies. He had a no-hitter going into the eighth inning, and got 2 outs, and he pitched Steve Jeltz, jammed him with a fastball in, and he had a little blooper that landed just out the reach of Elster's glove. Otherwise, he would have had the first no-hitter, possibly. He still had another inning to go, but he was a special pitcher, and he when he first came over in a trade, he was assigned the locker right next to me, and so we became best of friends pretty quickly, and we were all friends. We had a close-knit team, and that's something that I'm sure gets a lot of play, and people know that, but our ball club was always close. We picked each other up, we pulled for each other, and we fought for each other, and we all had the same goal in mind, to kick ass.
I remember the
and
game
to
he
win.
struck at 19 against the Phillies in Philadelphia.
That's right.
I've heard a side story to that
Yeah,
one.
we're not going to get into the side story with that. So, last question. Do you think it's crazy with all the great pitchers we had? We had Santana, then the combined no-hitter this year. Isn't it kind of crazy? All these guys left to pitch no-hitters away from the Mets. I mean, Seaver and and Dwight and Cone and
Yeah.
Yeah, all the good
That
pitchers.
is crazy, yeah.
I mean, just the history of great pitchers. We just got the
Nolan.
Nolan.
But it was all as they got older, most of them, except Nolan. I mean, he threw a lot of them, but it's just, I think as it matured, the maturity of it. is what I
Yeah.
think.
But they all had one hitters. I mean, Sid,
We had a
I
lot of
got
one
Sid
hitters.
with a one hitter, Coney a one hitter, and I know Doc had several one hitters,
yeah.
and,
So Tom.
as did Seaver, obviously.
Yeah, Jimmy Coyle's game and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But listen, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time, and hopefully next year we'll have another championship to celebrate.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you,
Thank
Jay.
you.
You're the
Thanks
best.
for the time,
It
guys.
was fun.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.